I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Associated Student Speakers Program to an address by Dr. Irving Bengelsdorf, who's a Los Angeles Times science editor. His subject is Spaceship Earth, Pollution and People, Population. My name is Nick Brestoff. Richard Marks, whom you usually see giving these introductions, is not here. I'm sort of subbing for him. I've spent most of this quarter working with a group called Survival Limited and the Daily Bruin. And I'd just like to say before I introduce Associate Dean of Engineering Russell O'Neill that if you're interested in working next year and during the summer about these problems here on campus to interest legislators and to get professors going and to get the university as a whole committed to the population and pollution problems, that there are 3 groups on campus that you can contact. There's the Conservation Club, there's Survival LTD, which is now a part of the Student Facilities Commission, and there is the Scientists for Social and Political Action. Any of these groups will be happy to accept any help you can offer them in any way. In addition, the Daily Bruin has established a new position for next quarter. That position is science editor, and I will be filling that position, and I will be going around campus in the science quad and trying to bring scientific issues to light on the campus community, perhaps revamp physical science courses and things like that. In any event, I'd like to get on with the program, and I'd like to introduce Associate Dean of Engineering Russell O'Neill for introductory remarks, and then Dr. Bengelsdorf. Dean O'Neill.
Thank you, Nick. Ladies and gentlemen, pollution is not a new problem at all, but the dimensions of the problem are certainly new. They're staggering. And running just as fast as we can these days, we can't even keep up. And this rapid change and necessity of running very fast, of course, affects everything, and particularly engineering. And being a part of the engineering school here, why, of course, that is of great concern to me. For 150 years, engineers have been trying to define what they are. And all of this time, there has been a certain thread running through the definition of engineering. Something like for the convenience of man, or for the benefit of mankind, or for the good of humanity, or needs of society. You find these phrases running through these definitions of engineering. And in general, what they have in mind is that the engineer will improve the material things, the shelter, the transportation, the communication, sanitation, these kind of things. But this is now changing, and I think that in engineering, we can't think only about these material things, but we must think about the quality of life as well as about the material things of life. One of the reasons is that the city that we have today is a product of modern technology, and the engineer has a very important part in this city. And we have a part. We must make it so that the city is a place to be enjoyed while you're here, not just a place to escape from. And any one of you who tried to escape from the city this last weekend would recognize the problems of escape. We can't escape. We're here. And so when I talk about the quality of life, I don't think of it as just kind of the frosting on the cake. This is something that you can have after you've taken care of the substance of the material things. It's really much more important than that, because the quality of life is really related very closely to survival. And I think that's a very appropriate name that Nick has selected. so that we are concerned with survival. And we have to think of survival in the years ahead, because one of the things that concerns, say, the School of Engineering right now is not today only, but tomorrow. And tomorrow for us is about the year 2000, because it is in the year 2000 that the engineering students who are with us today will be out in society and making the important decisions, so that we see this business of survival being extremely important when you look ahead to the future in this way. Well, on the note of the future, it brings me to our speaker for today. I recall reading some years back a very interesting article he wrote in the LA Times on the future. Our speaker has been with the LA Times since 1963. He is a science editor, and I guess one of the reasons that he's such a good science editor is that he's a good scientist. Before going to the LA Times, he was a research chemist in industry. He also was a teacher. As a matter of fact, he was full-time on the faculty here in chemistry from 52 to 54, and he still has an appointment with the Department of Chemistry now, teaching as on the program that they have for the campus as a whole. Our speaker, as I mentioned, is a chemist. He got his doctor's degree in chemistry from the University of Chicago. He also got his master's degree at the University of Chicago. And before that, the bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois. He went briefly to Cornell, but apparently didn't like it because stayed there only 1 year. So this makes a very interesting background for someone who is a science editor, and I'm sure this is what makes a very outstanding science editor. So it's my great pleasure to present Dr. Bengelsdorf to you.
Thank you, Dean O'Neill. I liked Cornell very much, but the U.S. government sent me to Hawaii under auspices of the United States Navy at that particular time in history. What I'd like to do today is give you an overall view of some of the problems, some of the very serious problems facing us today. And I'm very happy to be here for two reasons. Most of them, I mean, from the informational point of view, I'd like to indicate to you what these problems are, because you, and this may sound corny, but it's true, you are going to be the people who are going to be living in this particular environment. And the other reason, of course, is that we hear a great deal about how college students are protesting about all sorts of silly things. Why don't they really apply themselves to some serious problems? Well, I'll tell you about some serious problems today, and those of you who want to get interested in it, please do so. And as a matter of fact, you might have your first chance on Wednesday when a group of 62 scientists from institutions of higher education in California will send an open letter to Governor Reagan asking him to ban the use of DDT in the state of California. I would just like to point out that only one of the signatories is from UCLA. I don't know what this means. Perhaps UCLA didn't hear about it. I'd like to tell you about some of these problems that I have alluded to. The year 1960, oh, and by the way, I'm going to go over these fairly quickly, and I would appreciate a question and answer period at the end. I think we can get down to the nitty-gritty of some of the details. The year 1967 marked the 10th anniversary of the introduction of a new word into the English language, Sputnik. Actually, the word Sputnik comes from a four-word phrase announced by the Soviet Union on October the 4th, 1957. Pierwszy, first, искусственный, artificial, Sputnik, satellite, Zemlyi, of the Earth. The word has a most interesting derivation. The root part of Sputnik is the word put, which means path, road, journey, route, etc. The prefix S is the Russian preposition meaning with, so the combination of S and put indicates journey with. The suffix nik indicates an agent, one who does. It's equivalent to the English suffixes er or or, as in cutter, one who cuts, reznik, worker, one who works, rabotnik, and so forth. Thus, the prefix S attached to the root word put, attached to the suffix nik, indicates one who journeys with. So Sputnik means a fellow traveler, not in the political sense, but in the very real, actual, physical sense. A person accompanying you on a train or an airplane trip is a Sputnik. And an artificially produced piece of electronic hardware launched into orbit, accompanying Earth on its journey through space as its satellite, also is a Sputnik. Now, just recently, particularly with the Apollo flights, we've begun to realize that planet Earth itself is a Sputnik. We orbit around Mother Sun and accompany it on its journey through space. Our planetary home, indeed, is a massive, almost spherical satellite whizzing through space at a speed of 18.5 miles per second and covering nearly 600 million miles each time it completes one elliptically shaped orbit around the Sun, the length of a time we call a year. We are completely unaware of this incredible yearly motion in orbit. The major clue is the seasonal change. Winter gives way to spring, spring to summer, summer to autumn, and so forth. Now, as a Sputnik, Earth's dimensions are impressive. Its circumference at the equator measures 24,902 miles, and its mass is estimated at about 6.6 sextillion tons. That's 6.6 followed by 21 zeros. Well, what's unique about Earth is not that it is a sun Sputnik, nor that it is massive or large. After all, there are 8 other planets, 32 moons, thousands of asteroids, hundreds of comets, myriads of meteors also orbiting around the Sun. So being a sun Sputnik is not a rare phenomenon. Nor is Earth's mass or size extraordinary. Planet Jupiter, which also is a Sputnik of the Sun, has 318 times the mass and 11 times the circumference of Earth. What does make the Earth unique in the solar system is the presence of life. Anchored to the land are about 500,000 different kinds of plants, oak trees and kelp, corn and buttercups, grass and tobacco, and bacteria. And flying through the air, swimming in the sea, and moving on land are about 1 million different kinds of animals. Robins and pythons, dolphins and elephants, frogs and spiders, roaches and mice, and man. So all of us, every variety of plant and animal, are fellow passengers aboard a huge planetary spaceship, Spaceship Earth. And we owe our existence to the Sun, as this huge thermonuclear furnace, located neither too close nor too far away, unceasingly pours energy into our spaceship that causes green plants to grow, and animals eat the green plants, and we eat both the animals and the plants. So the sun provides us with food to eat. And in this process of the conversion of energy and sunshine into food, known as photosynthesis, green plants liberate oxygen, and so the sun provides us with oxygen to breathe. The sun's energy also desalinates the oceans, changing salty water to fresh water in the form of rain and snow to keep our lakes full and our rivers flowing. We keep on talking about desalinating ocean water by nuclear energy. It's going on all the time, naturally. So the sun also provides us with fresh water to drink. Our food, our air, our water comes from the action of the sun. So due to the sun, our planetary spaceship already comes equipped with the necessities of life, unlike artificial Sputniks launched by man that have to take food, water, air, and energy sources along with them. Now, at this particular point in time, 4.6 billion years ACSS after the creation of the solar system, there are about 3.5 billion fellow human passengers aboard Spaceship Earth, and their number rapidly is increasing. Now, it wasn't always so. From the beginnings of man, whenever that was, and Dr. Leakey now has evidence, Kenya and Uganda, of hominid-like fossils dating back 20 million years, that it took until 1650 for Earth's population to reach 1/2 billion people. It wasn't until 1850 that Earth's population reached 1 billion people. Then 80 years later, in 1930, the population reached 2 billion people, and only 30 years later, 1960, there were 3 billion humans living on the face of spaceship Earth. Now, in 1969, there will be about 123 million babies born and about 53.5 million people will die, a net increase for the year of about 70 million fellow spaceship passengers. This addition of 70 million people in only 1 year, this year, is about equal to the combined number of people who already live in Canada and Mexico. Such a yearly population increase is equivalent to adding every 3 years as many people as now reside in the United States. I'd like to point out that in India, for example, in the 22 years since independence from Britain, India has added about 185 million people, almost as many as now reside in the United States. For myself, who actively participated in World War II, it is difficult to realize that 1/2 of the population now living on Earth has been born since World War II. Even in the United States, 31% of the population is under the age of 15. The United Nations estimates the world population is now growing at a rate of 2% per year. That doesn't sound like very much, but at this rate, the population will double in about 35 years. Of course, the growth is uneven and regional. It's less than 1% per year in Europe. It's more than 3% per year in Latin America. So by the turn of the century, only 31 years from now, the number of people will more than double to almost 7 billion. Between now and the year 2000, the number of people that we shall add as new passengers aboard Spaceship Earth will be greater than the number that already exists today. And all of the population estimates have been conservative. They all have erred on the low side. Population is actually growing faster than even the wildest projections, and I'd like to point out that Spaceship Earth is a Sputnik with finite dimensions and resources. Well, you probably all know how the population explosion came about. That is, the death rate has been dropped, as we had things like penicillin and streptomycin and an insecticide with the name of dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane, or DDT for short. Since then, the world has not been the same, for these and related materials have made available to all people, from presidents and kings to peasants and aborigines, a control over death and disease that previously was unheard of. One ship anchored in the harbor of an underdeveloped country can carry enough antibiotics and insecticides to drop the death rate overnight to a level that took hundreds of years to achieve in what are now the developed countries. Prior to World War II, most of the world's people had an expectation of life at birth no greater than that in Europe during the Middle Ages. The resulting drastic lowering of the death rate, combined with a birth rate that was suitable for an era in which potent antibiotics and insecticides did not exist, has resulted in the population explosion and the specter of overpopulation. Now, either the birth rate of the world must come down or the death rate must go up. Now, everybody's in favor of death control, of saving lives, but there's still lack of agreement on birth control, and yet some form of birth control certainly must come. For science and technology can help to alleviate the physical problems of overpopulation, but only up to a point. Modern technology can grow algae as food or provide protein from petroleum. It also can help us provide more living space. We could colonize Antarctica and Mount Everest or the ocean floor. And it can provide almost unlimited amounts of energy from breeder nuclear fission or thermonuclear fusion reactors to support huge populations, 30 billion people, 10 times as many as today. But no amount of technology can substitute for birth control. As Dr. Dennis Gabor, the British physicist and fellow of the Royal Society, warns, though technology combined with overpopulation could abolish every trace of adventure, freedom, and dignity, it could not abolish the need for birth control. 10 times more people breed 10 times faster. The technique of birth control can be suppressed only if one abolishes also the techniques of death control, medicine, and hygiene, and nobody's in favor of that. Now, even if this growing number of people were distributed evenly across the face of our globe, there would be major problems. But they are not so distributed. More than half of the world's people live in the 5 largest countries: China, India, Soviet Union, the United States, and Pakistan. As a matter of fact, more than a third of the world's people live in 2 countries, China and India. So to those inhabitants who occupy those compartments of spaceship Earth called underdeveloped nations, the continuing increase in human numbers represents a precarious balance between near hunger and starvation, between poverty and extreme want. In general, those countries with the most rapid population growth are least able to deal with it. Now you have the twin problems of hunger, famine, and the economic gap that exists between the poor nations and the rich nation. Now, I won't go into the hunger problem in any great detail. I just want to point out that it's a matter of geography. About 71% of our spaceship surface is water, the oceans and the seas, and of the remaining 29% that is dry land projecting above the waters, not all of it is fit for human habitation or comfort. As a matter of fact, only 10% of the dry land is suitable for farming. That is, there are 33 billion acres of dry land. About a tenth of this, about 3.5 billion acres, are suitable. 4% of the land is polar ice caps, 18% of the land is bare rock, ice and snowfields of great mountain chains, another 18 to 20% of the land is desert, 20% of the land is luxuriant and often impenetrable tropical rainforests, 20% of the land is savannas, flat, grassy, marshy stretches with few trees. The good earth and favorable climate only lies in the prairies and deciduous forest regions of temperate and subtropical zones. These are the already highly populated subcontinent of India, eastern mainland China, most of Europe, and the U.S. east of the Rockies. So of the 33 billion acres of dry land available, only 3.5 billion acres now are farmed. At great expense and effort, only another 2.5 billion acres perhaps could be reclaimed and converted into crop use if all economic, educational, and technological problems could be solved. That's not a very likely prospect. So all present and all future potential cropland would add up to only 6 billion acres, with an anticipated world population of more than 6 billion people by the year 2000. So you have about 1 acre of farmland per person. And of course, this gives rise to the fact that that's all there is. There ain't no more. The delightful phrase, God's little green acre, is no longer a lyrical thought. It's a grim statistical measurement. Now, to illustrate the second major problem facing our planet today, the ever-widening economic gap that exists between poor underdeveloped nations and rich developed nations, I'd like to present a very brief course in geography. Not the traditional kind of presentation one receives by looking at pretty colored wall maps. The basis for my abbreviated course is the World Population Data Sheet put out in April 1969 by the Population Reference Bureau. And here's a copy of what it looks like. Obviously, we're not going to have time to discuss the 9 columns of information for 137 countries. So I'd like to just pick out a few of the countries, and I'd like to talk about 4 columns. 1, the estimated population of the country in middle of 1969. 2, the population doubling time, the number of years it'll take for the population to double if it continues to grow at its present rate. 3, the percentage of the population under the age of 15. And 4, the gross national product per capita as 1966 figures measured in U.S. dollars. The gross national product is the total value of goods produced and services rendered within a country each year. If one divides this GNP figure of a country by the number of its inhabitants, one finds the degree to which each person, on the average, shares in the wealth produced by that country. This figure, called the gross national product per capita, GNP per se, is a rough indicator of the material well-being of that country's citizens. I would like to warn you that it is an average figure and should be treated as such. You all know about the statistician who drowned while crossing a creek with an average depth of 3 feet. So let me give you some of these figures. The United States, population, 203.1 million people, doubling time, 70 years, Percentage under the age of 15, 30%. Gross national product per capita, $3,520. There's only one other country that has a GNP per C greater than $3,000, and that's Kuwait. Canada, 21.3 million people. That is, there's almost as many people in the state of California as in all of Canada. 21.3 million people, doubling time 35 years, percentage under the age of 15, 33%. Gross national product per capita, $2,240. I like to point out for all of those of you interested in immigrating that there are only 3 countries with a gross national product per capita greater than $2,000 and less than $3,000. That's Canada, Switzerland, and Sweden. Mexico, 49 million people, doubling time 21 years. Percentage under the age of 15, 46%. And this is precisely that part of the population that has to be taken care of by the others, and also is the focal point of the next fertility wave. These are the youngsters who are going to be reproducing in the near future. Gross national product per capita, $470. Brazil, 90.6 million people, doubling time 25 years, percentage under the age of 15, 43%. Gross national product per capita, $240. The Soviet Union, population, like ourselves, 241 million people, doubling time, like ourselves, 70 years, percentage under the age of 15, like ourselves, 32%, gross national product per capita, unlike ourselves, $890. Italy, 53.1 million people, doubling time of 100 years. Now this is where the Vatican is located, and obviously the Italians are doing something other than using the rhythm method. Percentage under the age of 15, 24%, gross national product per capita, $1,030. UAR, Egypt, 32.5 million people, doubling time 24 years. Percentage under the age of 15, 43%, gross national product per capita, $160. Kenya, 10.6 million people, 23-year doubling time, 46% under the age of 15, and they're all trying to get into Nairobi at the present time to try and find some jobs, as it's the only place where they can find some employment, and obviously it's going to be a very serious economic headache. Gross national product per capita, $90. India, 536.9 million people, more than 500 million Indians, doubling time, 28 years, percentage under the age of 15, 41%, gross national product per capita, $90. Pakistan, 131.6 million people, doubling time, 21 years, percentage under the age of 15, 45%, gross national product per capita, $90. Japan, 102.1 million people, doubling time, 63 years, percentage under the age of 15, 25%, gross national product per capita, $860. China, all we have is a UN estimate of 740 million people. It ranges as high, some of the estimates range as high as 900 million people, but it's quite obvious that we shall, many of you in this room will live to see the Chinese have 1 billion people. Now the figures clearly indicate an economic gap. If you divide the $3,520 GMP per C of the United States by the $90 GMP per C of India, you get a ratio of about 39. That is, the average American is 39 times wealthier than the average Indian. I'd like to point out this is only an average figure. Last year it was 34. The gap is widening. Same thing with Mexico. Last year the U.S. to Mexico GMP per C ratio was 7. This year it's 7.5. So what is distressing is that not only is this gap wide now, but the economic chasm continues to grow wider. The rich countries are getting richer faster than the poor countries are getting richer. Well, I'd now like to turn away from the problems of overpopulation in the underdeveloped countries and turn to the pressures developed by overpopulation in the developed countries. All are faced with an ever-increasing deterioration of the quality of life. Roger Revelle, from the Center of Population Studies at Harvard, back in 1965, wrote, "We in the United States need to examine more closely the social and economic costs of rising numbers of people in our own country. Increases in per capita costs of pollution abatement, municipal water supplies, outdoor recreation, and urban transportation are all consequences of our increasing numbers. During the past 2 decades, our rate of population growth was considerably higher than it is today. As a result, the number of high school students will have increased from 10 million in 1960 to 15 million in 1970. Within these 10 years, we must build new high schools equal in capacity to half of all those now in use in the United States." Then he was very prophetic. He says, "This is a hard thing for taxpayers to face, and in general, they do not seem really willing to face it." All of you know about the recent election here in Los Angeles. So, in many communities, the quality of our high school facilities is going down. Perhaps more serious is the decline in the quality of life, the crowding and dangers in our parks, the fact that our water does not taste as good as it used to, that many of our fellow citizens waste 1 or 2 hours per day driving to and from work under what can only be described as miserable conditions. I assume the same slogan of miserable conditions could be applied by all of those who were caught on the San Diego Freeway during the Memorial Day weekend, as the San Diego Freeway last Friday ceased to work. Kaput, defunct. It's for 4 hours. Nobody could move at all. And this is a symptom of something and very closely related to the air pollution problem here in Southern California, which I'll get to in a moment. The situation's bound to get worse, for not only are populations increasing, but at the same time, these increased numbers of people all want to crowd into and concentrate in cities. This will only intensify the already formidable problems of pollution, water supplies, recreation, transportation. The explosion in numbers of people gives rise to increasing technological demands, more food, more water, more shelter, more transport, more manufactured goods, more electricity, more services, etc. And all of these activities give rise to pollution. If you think we're crowded now, just think of the year 2000, when one of the estimates is that the U.S. will have a population of 340 million. As a spaceship, Earth is a closed space capsule. Essentially, only sunlight comes in, very little leaves, some heat, some gases. And so my first law of pollution follows from this concept of Earth as a closed spaceship. I call it the law of conservation of waste. We do not get rid of anything, we merely redistribute it. So when we say we get rid of waste, what we're really doing is just respreading the stuff here and there within our spaceship. It may be changed somewhat, but it stays with us in our journey through space. So our spaceship is becoming more dirty and untidy with each passing day. No creature has followed his natural nest so extensively as has man. And pollution not only perils man, but also his fellow animals and plants aboard Spaceship Earth. We now are all engaged in a massive pollution assault on the quality of our environment, for we live in an effluent society. No matter what we do, drive our cars, wash our clothes, mow our lawns, or merely exist, we continually discharge wastes into the air above us, the waters around us, and the land beneath us. Consider the pollution of our air. The burning of fuels, coal, oil, or natural gas in homes, vehicles, and factories gives rise to a horrendous aerial garbage of sulfur oxides, carbon oxides, nitrogen oxides, hydrocarbons, and lead. Dr. Claire Patterson at Caltech single-handedly has been examining the lead pollution problem. He goes to Antarctica and Greenland and bores cores into the snow, and then he examines the snow for their lead content, and he can go back in history, can show where the Roman Empire was and so forth, when the Industrial Revolution started, and lead is all over the place, and in the last 20 years, the amount of lead deposited in the snow in Greenland has gone up a factor something like 500. These pollutants kill trees, crops, and flowers, irritate eyes, noses, and throats, aggravate emphysema, place a stress on heart function, and may contribute to lung cancer. Automobile exhausts are a major source of insults to our air resource. The number of automobiles is increasing. You know, it's interesting that the birth rate of automobiles in Detroit's automated nurseries is more than double that of people in the United States. About 9 million cars are spawned each year to about 4 million babies born. And this is bound to get worse. Detroit now talks of annually turning out 13 million automobiles in the near future. The air of Southern California has been incredibly filthy for the last 25 years due to photochemical air pollution or smog, chiefly caused by the automobile. You know, there's a story about Gertrude Stein as she lay near death, hoping to get final insight into the meaning of life. Alice B. Toklas, who was Gertrude's secretary and close companion for 40 years, leaned over the author's bed and whispered, "Gertrude, Gertrude, what's the answer?" Gertrude stirred, mustered her strength, opened her eyes, looked at Alice and sighed, "What's the question?" Southern California, particularly, is afflicted with smog because for a quarter of a century it has asked the wrong question. Instead of asking how to get rid of smog, the question has been how to get rid of smog and save the automobile. They are two entirely different questions. Consider the contamination of our waters. It's an irony of our affluent society that New York City should be drought-stricken, suffering from a water shortage, with the Hudson River flowing past at a rate of 30,000 gallons per second, too filthy to be tapped for use. The American Great Lakes contain 1/3 of all the fresh water of the world. Precious resource. We really were blessed. 1/3 of all the fresh water in the entire planet is in our American Great Lakes. And they show falling water levels and rising pollution. Lake Erie, in particular, receiving sewage and industrial waste from 4 states and 1 Canadian province, is biologically dead. Someone has pointed out that both Lake Erie and Chesapeake Bay are too thick to swim in and too thin to plow. The only factor that saves Lake Michigan is that Chicago's waste is dumped into the Mississippi River, which is good for Chicago, but bad for the Mississippi. Now, nitrogen-containing substances from sewage and phosphorus-containing materials from detergents dumped into lakes act as fertilizers, permitting algae to burst into widespread bloom. The growing algae consume the available oxygen in the air. No oxygen, no fish. Now, this process involving the aging of a lake by the inpouring of nutrients is called eutrophication, E-U-T-R-O-P-H-I-C-A-T-I-O-N, eutrophication. You're going to hear a great deal more about it. It comes from 2 Greek words meaning well-fed, well-nourished. It takes place slowly in nature, whether man is present or not, as rain and snow slowly leach nutrients out of the soil and transfer them to the lake. But what man has done is to speed up enormously the normal aging of lakes through his dumping of sewage and detergent effluents into them. We also have the problem of thermal pollution. We all want more electricity, and it turns out that in the generation of electricity, all electrical generating stations are inefficient. They turn out more waste steam than they turn out electricity. Where's this waste steam to go? Well, we've been dumping it into the rivers and into the oceans, and the indications are now that it's estimated that by 1980, about 1/5 of all the water running annually in the rivers of the United States will be used to cool inland power plants producing electricity, which means there'll be a tremendous drive to get electrical plants built along the ocean coastline. There'll be a tremendous move of people towards the coast. I predict that the center of population will become Fullerton, California, and then the whole coastal section may fall off and crack on. So, the country's rivers, lakes, estuaries, and coastal waters will get warmer and warmer. If this is deleterious to life, we will speak about this as thermal pollution. If it's beneficial, as some aquatic forms like the warm water, then we'll call it thermal addition. But on the other hand, there are now some power plants in Maine and Vermont where the water downstream from the power plant is now running as high as 92 degrees. Not only will our waters get warmer, but so will our air. Each day, man-made activities in Los Angeles, operation of automobiles, factories, power plants, home heaters, etc., now generate so much heat that it amounts to about 3% of the total amount of heat that Los Angeles receives daily from the sun. Now, that's not a trivial amount of heat that you have to get rid of. So it's quite obvious I can make a very good prediction. Los Angeles is going to get hotter and hotter. We'll put in more and more air conditioners, which in turn will make it hotter and hotter. As Dr. Norman Brooks, civil engineering at Caltech, points out, this may be a good reason in the long-range view for not letting urban densities become too high in a highly industrialized technological society. Well, the problem of land pollution really staggers the imagination. We have to get rid of 1,600 pounds of solid waste as paper, grass, and brush cuttings, garbage, ashes, metal, glass, and ceramics. 1,600 pounds per person per year, or 300 billion pounds of solid waste annually for the country. As a matter of fact, this year in September, we're going to have the first national meeting on what to do with paper containers and other containers. Obviously, whenever you have a national meeting on a subject, it's a pretty serious matter. Every year, we must dispose of 48 billion metal cans, 250 per person, 26 billion bottles and jars, 135 per person, 65 billion metal and plastic bottle caps and crowns, 338 per person, and so on. Dr. Roger Revelle said that what this country needs is a beer can that people can eat. Paper cartons deteriorate with time, and steel cans eventually rust away, but aluminum cans are longer lived than plastic containers are nigh eternal in the pollution of our landscape. Each year, we must get rid of 25 million tons of scrap steel and iron, 1/3 of which is due to old derelict automobiles. Ethelstan Spielhaus has pointed out that all old automobile hulks be piled up in South Dakota. He hasn't consulted the South Dakotans as to whether this is all right, but he says let's pile them up in South Dakota and that the resulting peak be called the Alfred P. Sloan Memorial Mountain. Now, we also have, of course, pesticides, and DDT is one example of this. It is really playing havoc with the shore birds, as marine birds are on the verge of a very serious catastrophe. As a matter of fact, you know, the state symbol for Louisiana is the brown pelican, and there no longer are any brown pelicans in Louisiana. And I'd like to tell you that as of yesterday, as I have some information which indicates there are no longer any brown pelicans off the coast of California either. There are no juveniles. The ones that you see are adults. And the pelicans in Louisiana disappeared right after their eggshells started getting thinner. And we know precisely the biochemical details of how DDT works. It makes the eggshells thinner. So the bird may look all right, but it doesn't have any progeny, and that puts an end to things. And as a matter of fact, we reached the ultimate. Last week, a report from the Audubon Society, they now find bald eagles up in Lake Superior, northern Michigan, who are now laying eggs with no shells at all, just a membrane around them, as apparently they're carrying enough DDT, which destroys enough of the progesterone, the enzyme, the hormone, to prevent the laying down of normal eggshell. Well, it's becoming more and more evident that modern technology is used by society, permits us to alter our environment on a vast global, national, statewide, or local community scale. And I'd like to point out what Dean O'Neill indicated, that pollution is an old problem. There's nothing new in this. It's just that we can do things so much faster and on such a large scale. DDT is one example. In 25 years, we've covered the whole planet with it. And the changes brought about often are subtle, low-level, chronic situations. Unfortunately, we often know little of the long-range consequences of such alterations. One may find just as many experts to testify that these low-level pollutions are innocuous as there are experts who insist they are injurious. Who would have thought that men driving to work in central Los Angeles from the outlying districts of Santa Monica, San Pedro, or Van Nuys would result in severe eye irritation of the residents of Pasadena and Azusa, the mottling and stippling of the leaves of the grape vineyards of Cucamonga, or the complete loss of the ability to grow spinach and 12 other broadleaf crops in the Los Angeles basin, or that drilling for oil off Santa Barbara would affect the beaches of Corona del Mar and La Jolla. When a farmer in Central California sprays his crop with a pesticide, or a sanitation officer sprays a malarial swamp in Ceylon, they somehow may affect the amount of pesticide stored in the livers of snowy owls in the Arctic and penguins in the Antarctic and people everywhere. When the Soviet Union test explodes a nuclear weapon above ground on Novaya Zemlya Island in the Barents Sea, the food sold in supermarkets in Los Angeles, in Winnipeg, Canada, and Sydney, Australia shows a marked increase in radioactivity. Similarly, the above-ground test explosion of an American nuclear weapon in Nevada can affect the children of Utah, the milk of Mandan, North Dakota, and the rainfall of Albany, New York. Production of one more automobile in Detroit is destined to influence both the death and injury rate and the air quality of the entire United States. More and more, there is no place to hide from the pollution of our spaceship, and this leads to my second law of pollution, the law of mutual waste exchange. Each person's trash basket is bound to become the next person's living space. The great lesson to be learned is the problems created by technological advance cannot be solved by technology alone. The smog problem of Southern California, the water pollution of the Hudson and Potomac rivers, and the radioactive fallout and pesticide pollution of the entire globe are but consequences of political, military, social, and economic considerations. They may be technological in origin, but their solution lies elsewhere. I don't mean to say that technology can help. Systems analysis can help if society wants that help. But it's up to the scientists and the engineers to indicate what the alternatives are. The environment has been defined as the sum of all social, biological, and physical or chemical factors which compose the surroundings of man. I'd like to close by pointing out there's only one spaceship Earth, only one environment. The maintenance of its quality is a trust for us, both for ourselves and for the generations to follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You promised you would take
Sure.
questions.
Glad to.
Are there any questions? You've put out so much information, it'll take a while to digest it, I guess. But, yes.
Yes, Dr. Bengelsdorf, you said that only scientists would be able to initiate certain solutions to these problems. What, as a scientist, would be the immediate solutions you see to the smog problem in Southern California?
Well, one of the more immediate solutions, and as I say, these are rather easy social solutions, is that, we now burn something like 8 million gallons of gasoline a day, as more than the entire country of France. So if we could cut down on that appreciably, we'd help. One very simple way, for example, is to have carpools, as where if we insist upon driving one person to a car, then the Los Angeles area is already terribly overpopulated with respect to its natural air resource. Just can't handle it. So that's one solution. I'd like to point out that the air pollution problem is really one aspect of an overall transportation problem, as the clogging of the San Diego Freeway is just one symptom of this. And to all these enthusiasts of steam engines and electric engines and turbine engines, I'd like to point out that the San Diego Freeway would be just as clogged regardless what's underneath the hood. That is, you have a very serious transportation problem of how to move people from A to B. Now, I'm sure we have very many clever engineers around who can offer all sorts of advice as to how to move people from A to B without invoking the internal combustion engine. Now, you have a very serious economic and social problem tied in with the internal combustion engine. Right now, somewhere about 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 people probably in the LA area owe their livelihood to this engine. And so if you're going to do something about it, obviously it's something that should be done over you should phase it out as over a period of years to be able to keep these economic adjustments to a minimum. But this is precisely the point that I'm making. We don't even have a plan, a phase-out plan of any kind, or even considering anything of this sort. And of course, mass transit is, as far as I'm concerned, is a necessity from many points of view.
What then do you think is the university's role?
Well, I think the university's role is for scientists, and the beauty of technology is that it can offer alternatives, alternative ways of doing so, of doing things. I feel that what the engineers at the universities should do is indicate what the alternatives are to the present system that we have, this chaotic system of moving people around. Then when you have all the possibilities considered, is all they can do is offer these to the legislators. The real problem right now is that the legislators are not listening to the people, the executive is not listening to the people, and therefore in our democracy there's only one avenue open, and that's the judicial. And you are going to see more and more lawsuits being brought by the people, more referenda being circulated, more petitions, because this is the only avenue we have open. So all I can say is that all that the scientist and engineer can do is show what the possibilities are. After that, it's up to the people to realize that they have a choice.
Well, can this then become a student issue?
I think it can. I think that the students can look at the problem and perhaps with the aid of some of the professors indicate what the possibilities are, what can be done, and settle maybe on 2 or 3 or 4 of these possibilities, and you can start talking to the legislator. I feel that a student representations to the legislature would be incredibly good. That is, you would be able, but you must have all your facts right. This is very important. You must know what you're talking about. You must have all the facts down. You go visit they can't throw you out of their office because you're discussing a very serious problem. There's air pollution of this area. And so I think that the students can make a great contribution here.
Wouldn't perhaps another way of going about this be to get our own house together here? You spoke of carpools, for example, and to make a student issue out of single people in single cars here, that is, to impose a carpool rule for people on campus.
Well, obviously, I agree with you, but you're right back again to the social aspects of the issue. See, it's social, psychological, economic, all sorts of things that have nothing to do with the technology.
The matter of lowering the amount of pollution being individual or in the environment seems to me like a stopgap solution. Population keeps increasing. It seems to come right down to a matter of sooner or later you've got to control the population. But I ask you very openly, in your opinion on this, what might or will be done concerning population control?
Here in the U.S., of course, we have there are many things that are being done at the present time. As with the technology available, there is some technology around the corner, for example, but these are detailed. There are many things that could be done. One aspect of the technology is there will shortly be hormones available in very, very thin capsule that can be inserted under the skin and will last for about a year. This will be the prerogative of the female to have this little silicone enclosed capsule under the skin, and this will prevent conception for, let's say, about a year. When you have a system like this, then you see you can then, on a voluntary basis, as whenever you do want a child, the capsule is removed very simply, and one can then have children. The problem, again, is we have to re-examine our goals. That is what we want to do here. I mean, here we now go more than 200 miles to bring water into this area, and we're shortly going to go more than that, as up to the Feather River, and we're talking about going almost 1,000 miles to the Columbia to get water down here, which will only make the population increase. That is, the way to do this would be to move some of these industries to where the water is, perhaps, let's say redistribute some of the population. But considering the problems that we have right now, they're talking about this population in this area doubling I think that we're headed for incredible chaos if we consider along the present road. The rate is going down, that's right. But now we have a whole group of youngsters born post-war, and it'll be up to them. They'll be making the decision as to what will happen in the future. It's true, right now it is going down, but that doesn't mean that the population isn't increasing, just that the rate has fallen slightly. But we have this problem now. There will be a whole group of youngsters coming in who the decision will be up to them. Yes, on Wednesday there will be an open letter, and this will be announced in all the news media. There will be an open letter sent to Reagan by professors from various institutions in California asking him to ban the use of DDT. And they will also ask you, there is a bill in the legislature right now, I'm sorry I don't have the number with me, which asks for the same thing. And so these professors are asking individuals to write letters to the senators and assemblymen asking them to back this bill. So here would be one way of doing your little bit. To whom? No, it's a very potent biocide with across-the-board toxic properties, and it is the most, one can get involved in arguments about degrees of toxicity. If a bald eagle is dead, it's dead. I don't know if they have the knowledge to solve them, but I think they have the knowledge to present other alternatives which would really alleviate the problem a great deal. Yes, we have a great deal of information in the universities. One of the, as a matter of fact, this has been a big disappointment to me. That is, in whatever you call the establishment, the universities really are the only institution which has both the expertise to handle problems like this, as personnel that have the expertise, and presumably, from the scholarly point of view, no vested interest is attached to hinder, let's say, the solution of some of these problems. But you see, this is not really the case at all, and this really came out with the Santa Barbara oil spill, where the attorney who wants to try the oil companies cannot find any university geologists who want to testify. So I think the university people will have to make a decision themselves. After all, they're also going to be living in this world.
You made reference to birth control. What about death control? What are the prospects? What do you think will happen in the next 20, 30 years in terms of longevity?
Well, all the indications are that, at the present time, we seem to have some sort of biological clock built into us on this 70. Now, it may be that further research may be able to extend this, although, as I say, all the evidence seems unlikely at the present time that we'll be able to go to hundreds, 150 years, so forth. I think most of the research that's going on right now, therefore, is to say, okay, let's take the 70 years, but why don't we make them as productive and as fruitful and as healthy as possible, as trying to extend the health as best as possible. But this, of course, means, and you can see this happening in Southern California, which pioneers in many things, you have these the blooming now of all of these leisure world type of situations, that is communities for older citizens. So we'll have people living longer, and of course on the American standard they are also good consumers, and so we'll have a longer drain, let's say, on the resources. What one does about this, I don't know. I mean, I think one should be aware of it. As Paul Ehrlich at Stanford points out, one baby born in America is equivalent to perhaps 12 in India, because of it's going to be a consumer par excellence as far as our resources are concerned. I would like to point out to you that here we are with 6% of the world's population, and we're using up about half of the world's resources. Whether we're an aberration in history or what, I don't know, but it's something to think about. Bob.
We've been talking a great deal about educating the public on these problems, and yet there seems to be a wide militarized zone as to the implementation of these alternative modes that you speak of, and the definition of the problem. To use an analogy, I think a great majority of people wish to have gun control laws, but when it came up as a vote in the Senate, it was voted down. And so I get a little depressed about defining the problem for our legislators and still not being able to affect the kind of legislation that the people desire, all within the framework of laissez-faire economics and lobbyists and this whole conglomerate mess that exists. Presumably, the implementation of these alternative modes would be based upon the toxicologists, such as myself, offering some proof of human damage.
It's unfortunate that we have to wait until you fellows find enough evidence.
This is right. And then I asked, what kind of proof is possible? I can spend an entire career of exposing animals in the laboratory to simulated conditions, and then there'll always be some wise guy who says you can't extrapolate data from animals to man, okay? Even though the pharmaceutical industry is based on it. Then we can study man and the epidemiology of man and correlate these various ill health and environmental factors, smoking, what have you. You know the tremendous debate that goes on with not controlling all the variables, and therefore it's not unequivocal proof. Or somebody can always say, well, your reporting of increased emphysema is only an artifact because of better diagnostic purposes. We can't expose men to these things deliberately, and so what proof is possible? I'm just trying to seek the solution mode here and the implementation of these alternative modes that we speak of. Now, Mr. Yanniconi says sue.
Yes, and the value of the suit, the legal suit, is that essentially you then put the burden upon those who are doing the polluting to show that they are not. So you put them in the same corner that they have the public at the present time. All I can tell you is that the frustration is intense. I mean, as one of those involved in educating the public, it is very frustrating to put all the facts available in front of the public and find that you're not really making much headway. But I submit that we need the help of people like yourselves and the others in the universities to really keep hammering away and showing what the alternatives are and why whatever we're doing is not wise. Because those who are polluting would like nothing better than for everybody to stop complaining. And this is the whole purpose. So it's the old business of wearing you down, and you just have to keep up your good spirits and hope that one of these days there will be somebody in the legislature who will take your cause to heart and push it hard. But you have this problem, and this is why systems analysis will have a rough time. That is essentially what you're trying to do with system analysis is maximize an output. But What you have is the whole public at large when you get into the social problem, and here you have all these various little organizations within the public, that is the corporations, the government, and others, who are maximizing their own output for themselves. They don't take the whole body politic into consideration. So it's a very serious problem, but I think we just have to keep hammering away.
Are there any countervailing forces to your knowledge that can be organized to promote such suits as you were talking about? For example, I can think of the advertisement we see on television for, I think, Phillips 66, which advertises itself as clean gasoline. I've never seen any proof of this. I don't know anybody who has. I wonder, suits against companies misleading the public, as I think this company does, could be brought about by any organization, whether it exists now or can exist later.
There is one organization that's active right now. It's called the Environmental Defense Fund. And this, the attorney for this group is this Mr. Iannacone that Dr. Pogren mentioned. And this Environmental Defense Fund right now has a suit going in the state of Wisconsin trying to bar DDT, ban the use of DDT in Wisconsin. But it's really a tough fight because they wouldn't stand a ghost of a chance if this very beautiful biochemical evidence about the thin eggshells had not been produced. And then, as Dr. Pogren pointed out, even after you produce such beautiful scientific knowledge to indicate what's going on, this doesn't mean that society or those in charge of DDT and society are going to welcome it. As a matter of fact, everything is being done to fight the Environmental Defense Fund. But Iannacone might get involved also with Santa Barbara. The Santa Barbarans are thinking of suing the oil companies and putting the blame on them, as they want the oil companies to show in court that if they continue drilling, that they will not pollute the beach. Now, this is a different twist on the matter, and it'll be rather interesting. There's also a suit in Los Angeles, by the way, on smog. There's every industry in Los Angeles is now being sued. Roger Diamond has a suit going against all of the industries in LA. Obviously, this isn't going to work, but it's the sort of thing that I think can get more publicity for this problem.
Where is that organization located?
If you want to find out more information, write to Dr. Charles Worster. If you want to, I'll give you his name and address after the meeting. By the way, if any of you are interested in a copy of my remarks, I have a little booklet called Spaceship Earth, People and Pollution, just been published, and if any of you are interested, I have some with me. They're $1 a piece.
I'd like to add to the last thing you said. I think if universities were ever to bring a suit on pollution, smog, or other kinds of pollution, that finally the public would sit up and take notice. And so far the university has done nothing of this sort. The students have said nothing when the oil in Santa Barbara pours all over the place. And the students do not demonstrate as the Santa Barbans demonstrate and about pollution. The students are not yet tuned in to the problem that, of course, they will be the recipients of whatever they argue for today in the future. They will be living there in that time, and if they can get the university going with quote-unquote student power, then they'll have a much better chance of a much better environment. And that's why I became interested in the problem, here at school, and I can't, urge you strongly enough, again, to inquire about these three groups on campus: the Conservation Club, Survival LTD, and the Scientists for Social and Political Action. And there are professors on campus that are interested in it. Go out and find out who's doing what research, and say something.
The Conservation Club has been in touch with Iannacone on this matter, and he says in general to get a group together here in town. He's pretty busy. He runs on shoestrings, so to speak. And as Nick points out, we do have information on many of these, and we'd like to contact this fellow Roger Diamond that has the lawsuit, it's $500 billion.
That's right. He's suing to give every person in LA something like $5 million or $5,000 as damage suffered from the air pollution.
I think one more,
Oh,
maybe that would be
yes.
the last
All right.
question there. You've been patient.
I'm interested on the worldwide basis, what you have to say about the idea that family planning programs aren't going to work in relation to Kingsley Davis' article, and the idea that their goals aren't right.
That's right. What is being alluded to here is that whenever you, well, let's face it, population growth is a very, very complex problem interwoven with all sorts of inputs, which are not technological at all. There's a psychological need to reproduce. In India, for example, it's their social security. That is, if you have 8 children, you may have 1 male that survives to take care of you in your old age. In Latin America, there's this cult of machismo, where you have to show that you're virile by the size of the family that you have. All sorts of problems that go into this which have nothing to do with the technology. Now, if you put it on a voluntary basis, as family planning, as Kingsley Davis points out, then obviously you're not going to get anywhere. That is, because even if you want to go along with it, as you say, okay, I'll withhold having children, then you look at the next guy and he's having a tremendous number of children, so then you'll say, oh, I've been fooled. So it's a very serious problem. You have to have some sort of agreement among people. This is what Garrett Hardin at University of California, Santa Barbara calls the tragedy of the commons, as those people who do have good intentions are always outfoxed by the others who don't care. So there is a group now that's just been organized, and if you want more information, you can write to Paul Ehrlich at Stanford University. Just been organized, and it's called Zero Population Growth. This is what the aim will be. That is, this doesn't mean that there will be no children, just that the rate of population growth will go to 0. How successful they're going to be as to what will be instrumented, I don't know, but at least they will bring this out in the open.
Well, thank you very much on behalf of all the people here and those who had to leave for their 1 o'clock. Thank you.